So what do we have here? It looks like a Roots type air pump of some sort. So is it a blower? Or is it a supercharger? You know, it can be either one, and there's a huge difference. So let's zoom out a little bit and see whether this is a supercharger or a blower. Well, let's see. The air goes in there, through the bottom, up through that pipe, seems to go across the engine, and into an intake manifold. So it's a supercharger. So what exactly is this anyway? Well, this is a 743 cubic inch Cummins diesel engine. And in naturally aspirated form, without that iron lung on it, it puts out 220 horsepower. But when Clessie Cummins and his engineers bolted that supercharger on there, they packed enough air into those cylinders they could add more fuel, and they got 320 horsepower out of it. So what's this 320 horsepower, 2,800 pound engine doing here? Well, if you look, it seems to be mounted in some sort of a chassis. So what is it? Well, it's a 1-ton truck chassis. Now, what kind of a madman would put a 320 horsepower Cummins diesel that belongs in a hot semi-truck from the 1950s and put it in a 1-ton truck frame? Well, that's what we're doing here. And the guy that's talking to you is that very madman, the same guy on the Old Iron YouTube channel. And we're making a chunk of old iron here for sure. So what do we got here? Well, we started out with a 1966 Dodge 1-ton that was given to me because they were trying to clear it off a lot they were building a church on. And every cross member and every rivet was drilled out and thrown away, and we started over again. And we bought an old 220 for 50 bucks. It had a crack in the block and a dead piston. Used that for a template in order to create the engine mounts and make sure that the contraption would actually work. Well, it did. So we went looking for a supercharged engine, and we found it at a crane scrap yard. It came out of a crane. So I took the fuel system and had a limiting speed governor put on it instead of a constant speed governor, which was in the crane, and had it doped up from 290 horsepower to 320 by changing the control parts list. So just for fun, take a look at that. That steering gear came out of a late 40s, early 50s Kenworth fire truck. It used to have a big jacket on it that went clear up into the cab. That's been removed. There's a keyway put in that shaft. We got a universal joint there. We got a steering shaft that'll go into the cab. This transmission is a Fuller TO905A, a twin countershaft 5-speed with a .65 overdrive, which is very long-legged. Because we have a 2100 RPM engine here, and somehow we got to make this thing do 100 miles an hour on the highway. So we need the longest legged gearing we can get. So what do we got back here? What we have here is an axle out of an 89 or a 90 Dodge Cummins pickup. It's a Dana 70. It has 3.07 gear ratio in it, which is the longest legged Dana 70 you can find, and they are rare. They are hard to find. So with the 0.65 overdrive ratio in that transmission and the 307 rear end here, and then these wonderful 8R 19.5 tires, which are pretty darn tall, theoretically this thing should go 100 miles an hour. Will I ever have the guts to make it go 100 miles an hour? Well, I'm old enough now that it really wouldn't make a whole shit pot full of difference if I did go 100 miles an hour in it. So the next thing we're going to go and look at is the cowling and the dash and the wiring that is being done in a different place. But anyway, this is our build for right now. And we are going to keep posting new videos showing the progress. Oh, while we're at it, here's the grill. This is off of a mid-50s, early 50s Federal truck. Never heard of a Federal truck? Federal Motor Truck Company, Detroit, Michigan, USA. They were in business from 1910 to 1959. Here's the running boards. They just came back from the powder coater. One will have the fuel tank mounted on it, one will have the battery box mounted on it. And there's the cab back there. It's been POR'd inside, sandblasted right down to bare metal. It's got epoxy primer on the outside. We're going to resand it, reprime it, and paint it. We already have the cab mounts all made. We got a bunch of other stuff all made. It'll all go together pretty fast once we finish wiring it. We're also changing these cross members. As you see, this square tubing cross member was a mistake. Actually, not a mistake, it was out of necessity. I threw this thing together with that old 220 just to see if it would actually work, so I just used what scrap I had. Well, that square cross member creates severe stress points right in there where those welds are. It won't be long before it's cracking around there for sure. So now we're in the process of putting channel cross members in. We got 3 of them here. 1 goes in the front, 2 go in the back. They're 1/4-inch channel. And we have 1/4-inch brackets, which are in the process of being mounted in to mount those cross members on. So that's the progress we've made so far, and we're going to go look at the dash. Now, you heard me mention a Federal truck. They were made in Detroit. They were kind of like Diamond T's. They all used regular components from different manufacturers. Same engines, same transmissions, same rear axles, and so forth. The Diamond T's were a little more fancy, and the Federals were a little more utilitarian. But they were darn good trucks. So I have a 1947 Federal cab, and here is the dashboard and the cowling, and we're in the process of wiring it. Now, I wired it on the bench, and then I put the dashboard back into the cowling, and I had a horrible rat's nest. It was a major screw up. So why did I do that? Well, I didn't think about the fact that I needed a harness in there that was not going to conflict with anything and was bundled up together. Those wires that I put in there looked like a rat's nest, and I ripped them all back out and started over. Every wire that I put in this machine is crimped, it is soldered, it is shrink tubing, and numbered for every circuit. Every circuit is numbered, but I'm starting over again. Now, there's another thing in the way. Once I got it in there, you see that crossbar there? Well, that goes clear across, and the steering gear mounts to that. And once I got the steering gear in there, I can't reach up there and even change a light bulb behind the speedometer. Now, speaking of speedometers, that is a Federal speedometer that goes to 110 miles an hour. they all were actually topped out at 60 or 70 depending on the truck they were put in. So when I had that speedometer rebuilt, I had it recalibrated, I had it re-silk screened, and now when this machine goes 75, 80 miles an hour cruising down the freeway, I can actually see the needle instead of having it pinned to the bottom all the time. And I added a Stuart Warner tachometer and a voltmeter, which weren't in there before. But here's the canny thing that I had to do to make this thing sane. I decided to turn it in to a dashboard that I can actually open up and work on it. Sort of like a Kenworth or a Peterbilt. So, as I finish rewiring this for the second time, and doing it correctly this time, we'll end up with a pretty good deal. We'll mask off the dash, we'll paint everything, we'll reattach this cowling to the cab, we'll mount it back on the chassis. So, that's the Madman project for this month. We'll see you later.